The scent of cinnamon rolls was thick in the kitchen that Christmas morning. Just the scent. The warmth seemed to stay right there, trapped in the air, not reaching me as I poured coffee. In the living room, my family's laughter echoed, a melody I'd long since learned I wasn't invited to sing along with. My sister Jessica sat on the sofa, her 2 children, a blur of energy, chasing each other around the Christmas tree. Her husband, Mark, made half-hearted attempts to get them to settle down. My mother, Eleanor, perched on the edge of Richard's armchair, holding up a diamond bracelet Jessica had just given her. "Another beautiful gift, sweetheart," she cooed, admiring the sparkle. "You always know exactly what I want." I carried my coffee into the room, choosing the chair furthest from everyone else. No one looked up. The kids ripped into presents, wrapping paper flying like confetti. Mark handed Jessica a small box. Inside were pearl earrings that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Gorgeous," she shrieked, kissing his cheek. Richard cleared his throat then. "Must be nice having a husband who actually takes care of you." The comment hung in the air, heavy and stale. I just sipped my coffee. Years of these little jabs had taught me that any response only made things worse. My supposed crime? Being 32, unmarried, childless, and focused on my career. In their eyes, I'd failed at the only things that truly mattered. "Some of us prefer independence," I finally said. Eleanor snorted. "Independence? Is that what we're calling it now?" Jessica pulled a large envelope from under the tree, presenting it to our parents with a flourish. "We wanted to do something special this year." Richard opened it carefully, his eyes widening. "A cruise to Maine?" "Jessica, this is too much." "Nothing's too much for you too," Mark chimed in, slinging an arm around Jessica. "You've done so much for us." I bit the inside of my cheek. They'd done so much for Jessica. Paid for her wedding, helped with a down payment on their house, provided free childcare whenever she needed it. Meanwhile, when I'd asked to borrow money for a security deposit on my first apartment 8 years ago, Richard had lectured me for 20 minutes about fiscal responsibility before flat-out refusing. The gift exchange continued. Jessica received a designer purse from Eleanor, a new tablet from Richard, and the kids got piles of toys and clothes. Mark scored a golf club set he'd been eyeing. I handed out my own modest offerings, a cookbook for Eleanor, a biography Richard had mentioned, educational games for the kids, and a scarf for Jessica. "How thoughtful," Jessica said, her tone making thoughtful sound like an insult. There were no presents for me. It wasn't a surprise. It had been this way for years, ever since I'd stopped pretending their treatment didn't sting. They called me difficult, ungrateful, jealous. The truth was simpler, I refused to play along with their fantasy of a perfect family. After gifts, Eleanor announced brunch. We moved to the dining room, where she'd laid out enough food for 20 people. Ham, eggs, pastries, fruit, the works. Everyone loaded their plates while discussing Jessica's new promotion at her marketing firm. "Regional director," Richard announced proudly. "My daughter, the regional director." "Congratulations," I offered. Jessica gave me a tight smile. "Thanks. Not all of us can be satisfied with middle management." I worked as a senior financial analyst at a major corporation, a position I'd earned through years of hard work and 2 master's degrees I paid for myself. My name is Sarah, but in this house, I might as well be invisible. My accomplishments here evaporated like morning dew. Halfway through the meal, Richard glanced at his phone, a frown creasing his brow. "Credit card bill just posted. Good heavens, the heating costs this month." "Winter's expensive," Mark said sympathetically. Eleanor sighed dramatically. "Everything keeps getting more expensive. I don't know how we're supposed to manage." The performance had begun. I'd seen it countless times, these carefully orchestrated complaints designed to make me feel guilty. The thing was, my parents weren't struggling. Richard had retired from his accounting job with a full pension. Eleanor had never worked outside the home. They owned their modest house outright for 15 years. But 4 months ago, they'd made a series of spectacularly bad decisions. First, they co-signed on a boat Mark wanted but couldn't quite afford. Then, they took out a home equity loan to renovate their kitchen with top-of-the-line appliances. After that came a timeshare in Arizona, a new car for Eleanor, and a string of expensive trips. Suddenly, their comfortable retirement had become financially precarious. "We might have to cut back on groceries," Eleanor continued, pushing food around her plate. "Maybe start buying generic brands." Richard nodded gravely. "Could be worse. At least we have family who cares about us." The implication was clear. I was supposed to offer help, to open my wallet and solve their self-created problems while they continued treating me like an inconvenient stranger who happened to share their DNA. Instead, I asked Mark to pass the salt. The conversation moved on, but the tension lingered. Jessica described their upcoming vacation to Aruba. The twins begged to open more presents. Eleanor complained about her sister Brenda never calling anymore. Normal family chaos, except I was a ghost at the table, present but invisible. After brunch, while everyone else relaxed, I started cleaning up. Eleanor wandered into the kitchen as I loaded the dishwasher. "You could be more engaged," she said. I straightened up and faced her. "I've been here all morning." "Physically, yes, but you're so cold, honey. So distant. It hurts Jessica's feelings, you know? She tries so hard to include you. We all do. But you make it impossible." I closed the dishwasher with more force than necessary. "I bought gifts. I showed up. I'm literally cleaning your kitchen right now. What else do you want from me?" Eleanor's expression hardened. "A better attitude would be a start. Some appreciation for everything we've done for you over the years." "Everything you've done?" I repeated slowly. "Like what, specifically?" "We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head." "That's called being a parent," I said. "It's the legal minimum." Her face flushed. "How dare you? After everything, you stand there and disrespect me like this?" I turned back to the sink, my hands trembling slightly. "I'm not doing this today." "Of course not. You never want to do anything that requires actual emotional maturity. That's why you're alone. Nobody can stand being around someone so selfish." The words landed like physical blows, but I'd heard variations of them before. I finished rinsing the plates in silence while Eleanor stood there, apparently waiting for me to apologize or break down. When I did neither, she huffed and walked away. The afternoon dragged on. The kids napped. Mark and Richard watched football. Jessica helped Eleanor prepare dinner. I sat in the corner reading a book on my phone, trying to ignore the pointed looks and whispered conversations clearly about me. Around 4, financial anxiety reared its head again. Richard mentioned the property taxes coming due, and Eleanor worried aloud about whether they could afford the cruise Jessica had gifted them. "Maybe we should postpone it," Richard said reluctantly. "No." Jessica looked stricken. "You have to go. I already paid for everything. We can't expect you to cover all our expenses, sweetheart. You have your own family to think about." The martyrdom act was in full swing. I kept my eyes on my phone, refusing to engage. "There has to be something we can do," Eleanor said. "Maybe cut our prescription coverage?" "Don't be ridiculous," Mark interrupted. "You need your medications." Jessica's eyes drifted to me, then away. If only there was someone who could help. Someone without children to support or a spouse to consider. Someone with disposable income. The room went quiet. Even the football announcers seemed to lower their volume. Richard cleared his throat. "We would never ask our children for money. That wouldn't be right." But if someone offered, Eleanor added quickly, out of the goodness of their heart and a sense of family obligation, well, that would be different. I looked up from my phone. How much? Everyone's head swiveled toward me. Jessica's eyebrows rose. How much what? How much money do you need? Richard shifted in his recliner. Well, that's hard to say exactly. The property taxes are around $4,000, and the credit cards have maybe $6,000 combined, plus the boat payment is $500 a month. So roughly $15,000 would clear everything immediate, I calculated quickly. And maybe another $6,000 annually for ongoing boat payments. Eleanor's eyes gleamed. That would certainly solve our problems. Of course, we couldn't accept such generosity unless you were absolutely sure. I'm not offering, I said calmly. I'm just clarifying the scope of your financial mismanagement. The gleam died instantly. Excuse me? You heard me. You're in this mess because you've made one irresponsible choice after another. The boat you can't afford, the kitchen renovation you didn't need, the timeshare, all of it. And now you want me to bail you out? I've been watching this train wreck for 4 months now, documenting every guilt trip and manipulation. Richard's face turned red. We don't want anything from you. Really? Because for the past 6 months, every conversation we've had includes some mention of your money troubles. Every family gathering features a performance about heating bills or grocery costs. You've made your expectations crystal clear. Jessica stood up. Mom and Dad have given you everything. The least you could do is help them in their time of need. Everything, I repeated. They've given me everything. Tell me, Jessica, who paid for your wedding? She blinked. That's different. Who made the down payment on your house? We paid them back, Mark interjected weakly. Did you? Because Richard mentioned at Thanksgiving that you still owed $12,000 on that loan. Mark's face went pale. Richard shot him a look that could melt steel. I continued. Who watches your kids 3 days a week for free? Who bought you the minivan when your old car died? Who paid for that European vacation you took for your anniversary? Family helps family, Eleanor said defensively. That's what people do. Interesting theory. So, when I asked to borrow $3,000 for my apartment deposit, why did Richard tell me I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet? You were 24 years old. Richard snapped. It was time you stopped expecting handouts. But Jessica was 26 when you paid for her wedding, which cost over $40,000. Silence crashed through the room. The twins stirred on the couch but didn't wake. This is what I'm talking about, Eleanor said, her voice shaking with anger. This jealousy, this bitterness. It's poisoning you. I'm not jealous. I'm pointing out the double standard that's existed my entire life. Jessica crossed her arms. Maybe there's a reason we get treated differently. Maybe it's because I actually appreciate what Mom and Dad do for me instead of throwing it back in their faces. You appreciate it? I laughed without humor. You expect it. There's a difference. Richard stood up, his hands clenched into fists. I think you should leave. I was planning to write after dinner. No. Now, Sarah. The room spun slightly. I'd expected anger, but the cold finality in his voice caught me off guard. Eleanor moved to stand beside him, presenting a united front. We've tried so hard with you, giving you chance after chance to be part of this family, but all you do is criticize and complain. I've literally been sitting quietly all day. Your silence is judgmental, Jessica added. We can all feel it. Mark nodded in agreement, though he looked uncomfortable. Richard took a step forward. Paying bills doesn't buy you a place in this family. Love, respect, gratitude, those are what matter. And you've shown none of them. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Which bills are we talking about, Richard? Yours or mine? His face went purple. Sarah, right now. Before I say something I'll regret. I stood slowly, setting my phone down on the side table. Before you say something you'll regret? That's rich. Eleanor's expression twisted into something ugly. Stop envying your sister. It's pathetic. Just because you failed at creating a life worth living doesn't mean you get to drag the rest of us down with your misery. The words should have hurt. Maybe once upon a time they would have. Instead, I felt something unlock inside my chest. Some final chain breaking. I smiled. Then pay your own bills. The color drained from both their faces. Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Eleanor actually took a step backward. What are you talking about? Jessica demanded. I picked up my purse from the chair. Your parents have been telling everyone they're financially independent, comfortable retirees living within their means. But that's not quite true, is it? Richard found his voice. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Should we discuss the mortgage you took out last year? The one you told everyone was a home equity line of credit for renovations? Eleanor's hand flew to her throat. We did renovate. After paying off the $17,000 in credit card debt you'd accumulated, the debt from the Arizona timeshare deal that fell through, the boat down payment, and Eleanor's new car lease. How do you know about any of that? Richard's voice had gone quiet and dangerous. I shrugged. I'm a financial analyst. It's literally my job to understand money. Plus, you used me as a reference on the mortgage application. The bank called to verify my information. Jessica looked between our parents with growing confusion. You said you own the house outright. We do. Eleanor insisted. Essentially, we just needed a small loan to manage some temporary cash flow issues. $140,000 isn't small, I said. And it's not temporary when you're retired on a fixed income and can barely make the monthly payments. Richard's face had gone from purple to white. You had no right to discuss our private financial business with anyone. I haven't discussed it with anyone until now. But since you've decided to kick me out of the family for refusing to fund your lifestyle, I figured we might as well be honest about why you really wanted me here. Mark stood up. Maybe we should all calm down. Shut up, Mark, I said pleasantly. This doesn't concern you. He sat back down. I turned to Jessica. Did you know that the boat you convinced Richard to co-sign for, the one he's making $500 monthly payments on? Mark hasn't made a single payment himself. Not one. Richard's been covering it entirely. Mark's face went red. I've been meaning to start contributing. Business has been slow. Business has been slow for 18 months. Interesting. Almost as long as you've had the boat. Jessica looked at her husband with something close to betrayal in her eyes. You told me you were paying for it. I am. I mean, I will. I just needed some time to get back on my feet after the investment didn't pan out. What investment? She asked slowly. This was getting better than I'd anticipated. The cryptocurrency thing, I supplied helpfully. The one where he lost $40,000 last March. Mark stood up again. How could you possibly know about that? You told me when you called asking to borrow money to cover the loss before Jessica found out. The room exploded. Jessica started yelling at Mark, who defended himself by pointing out she'd spent $15,000 redecorating their house without consulting him. Eleanor tried to play peacemaker while simultaneously shooting me looks of pure hatred. Richard just stood there, his hands shaking with rage. I headed toward the door, stepping over scattered wrapping paper and discarded toys. Merry Christmas, everyone. Thanks for a lovely holiday. You vindictive witch. Eleanor hissed. You couldn't stand seeing us happy, so you had to ruin everything. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. I'm not the one who ruined anything. You all did that yourselves. I just stopped pretending not to notice. Richard moved toward me with alarming speed. For a moment, I thought he might actually get physical. If you leave now, you're not welcome back. Ever. Somehow, I think I'll survive. I walked out into the cold December evening, my breath forming clouds in the air. The drive home took 30 minutes, my phone buzzing constantly with incoming texts. I ignored them all. My apartment was dark and quiet when I arrived, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I woke to find 73 missed calls and 42 text messages. Most were from Eleanor and Jessica, alternating between fury and attempts at manipulation. A few were from relatives I barely knew, people Eleanor had apparently called to share her version of events. I deleted them all without reading and made myself breakfast. Around 10 in the morning, someone knocked on my door. I checked the peephole and saw Richard standing in the hallway, dressed in his church clothes and looking grim. I opened the door. What do you want? We need to talk. I think we said everything that needed saying yesterday. He pushed past me into the apartment without invitation. I considered forcing him out but decided against it. Let him say his piece and leave. You embarrassed your mother, he began. In front of your sister and her husband. You aired our private business and caused a massive fight that lasted until past midnight. Sounds exhausting. This isn't funny. You've torn this family apart with your selfishness and jealousy. I closed the door and leaned against it. Is that all? I want you to apologize to your mother, your sister, and Mark. I want you to admit that you were wrong and commit to making things right. Or what? He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. Or I press charges. I stared at him. Charges for what? Fraud, identity theft, illegal access to financial information. He unfolded the paper, which appeared to be some kind of police report form he'd printed off the internet. You admitted yesterday to accessing our mortgage information without permission. You obtained private details about our financial situation through fraudulent means. That's a crime. The absurdity made me laugh out loud. I was listed as a reference on your mortgage application. The bank called me. There was no fraud involved. You had no right to keep that information or use it against us. Against you? I kept the information to myself for over a year. I only mentioned it when you kicked me out of the house for refusing to give you money. Richard's jaw clenched. That's not how it happened. That's exactly how it happened. But sure, Richard, go ahead and file a police report. I'm certain the officers will be very interested in hearing why you're so upset about me knowing the truth about your finances. He stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with his height. You think you're so smart, so much better than the rest of us. But you're alone, and you'll stay alone because nobody can love someone as cold and calculating as you. The words still didn't hurt the way he wanted them to. Are we done here? Apologize, or I'm going to the police station right now. I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder. Before you do that, you might want to look at these. He took the folder suspiciously. What is this? Documentation. Bank statements, loan documents, mortgage information, all obtained legally through public records and information I was entitled to as a listed reference. There's also a timeline of every conversation we've had over the past 4 months where you've hinted about needing money, transcripts of text messages from Eleanor asking me to help out the family, and a detailed breakdown of the financial gifts you've given Jessica over the past 10 years compared to what you've given me, which totals exactly 0. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. Why would you compile all this? Because I'm a financial analyst, and I document things. It's what I do. And because somewhere around month 2 of your endless guilt trips, I realized you were building up to something big. I wanted to be prepared. Richard threw the folder on my coffee table. This proves nothing except that you're paranoid and obsessed with keeping score. It proves that I never accessed anything illegally. It also proves a pattern of financial favoritism and attempted manipulation. So, if you want to go to the police and accuse me of fraud, go ahead. But they're going to see all of this, and they're going to have questions about why you're really filing the report. He stood there breathing heavily, clearly trying to figure out his next move. I softened my voice slightly. Richard, I don't want to fight with you. I never did. I just wanted to be treated fairly. The same consideration you showed Jessica, the same support and respect. That's all I ever wanted. You wanted us to fund your lifestyle. I wanted you to acknowledge my existence. There's a difference. He picked up the folder and tucked it back under his arm. Your mother is devastated. Jessica won't stop crying. You've destroyed this family. The family was already broken. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. Richard walked to the door, then turned back. I'm still going to file that report. You'll see what happens when you cross your own blood. He left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frames on my walls. I made another cup of coffee and tried to focus on work emails, but my concentration was shot. The morning stretched into afternoon. Around 3, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Sarah Miller? A male voice asked. Yes, this is. This is Officer Miller with the City Police Department. I'm calling regarding a report filed this morning by a Richard Miller. I understand he's your father. My stomach tightened. That's correct. Mr. Miller has accused you of fraud and identity theft related to accessing his financial information. I'd like to ask you some questions about that if you have time. I took a breath. Of course. I can come to the station if you'd like. That won't be necessary right now. I just need to understand the situation. Your father claims you illegally obtained details about his mortgage and bank accounts. Can you explain how you came to have this information? I walked Officer Miller through everything, the bank's phone call verifying me as a reference, the public records, the timeline of events. He listened without interrupting, occasionally making sounds of acknowledgement. When I finished, there was a long pause. And you have documentation of all this? Yes, sir. Everything's properly filed and dated. Another pause. Miss Miller, would you be willing to bring that documentation to the station today if possible? Absolutely. When? As soon as you can get here. Your father and mother are currently in the waiting room. My hands went cold. They're both there? Yes, ma'am. They came in together this morning and have been here since. Your father seemed quite determined to pursue this matter. I grabbed my folder and keys. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The police station was a squat brick building downtown. I found Officer Miller at the front desk, a middle-aged black man with kind eyes and an expression that suggested he'd seen every variety of human stupidity imaginable. Miss Miller, that's me. He led me through a door into a small conference room where my parents sat on one side of a table. Eleanor's eyes were red from crying. Richard looked grimly satisfied, like he'd already won. Please have a seat, Officer Miller said, gesturing to the chair across from them. I sat and placed my folder on the table. Richard's eyes fixated on it immediately. Officer Miller remained standing, his arms crossed. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I've spoken with your daughter about the allegations you've made. She's provided an explanation that differs significantly from yours. I'd like to give you both an opportunity to respond after I clarify a few things. Richard leaned forward. Officer, our daughter has committed a crime. She accessed our private financial information without permission and has been using it to emotionally manipulate us. We want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I understand that's your position. However, Ms. Miller has documentation showing that she was listed as a reference on your mortgage application, that the bank contacted her directly, and that she pulled additional information from public records that anyone can access. Can you dispute any of those facts? Eleanor's mouth opened and closed. Richard's confidence wavered slightly. Even if the bank called her, Richard said, she had no right to keep that information or use it against us the way she did. Officer Miller nodded slowly. Let me make sure I understand the sequence of events. You listed your daughter as a reference on a loan application. The bank contacted her to verify information, which is standard procedure. She then compiled additional publicly available financial information. Later, during a family gathering, you asked her to give you a substantial amount of money. When she refused, you told her to leave your home. In response, she mentioned that she knew about your financial situation. Does that accurately summarize what happened? She was cruel about it, Eleanor interjected. She threw our problems in our faces. Ma'am, I'm not here to mediate family conflicts. I'm here to determine if a crime was committed. And based on everything I've heard and seen, he tapped the folder I brought, no crime was committed. Richard's face went red. But you, sir, your daughter was legally entitled to the information the bank provided her. She legally obtained public records. She documented conversations and text messages that you sent to her. None of that constitutes fraud or identity theft. Then what about harassment? Eleanor demanded. She's been keeping files on us like we're criminals. Officer Miller's expression hardened slightly. Mrs. Miller, documenting interactions with family members isn't illegal. In fact, given the situation she's described, it was probably wise. He opened my folder and pulled out several pages, spreading them across the table where my parents could see. Text messages from Eleanor asking me to help out during this difficult time. Emails from Richard hinting about financial struggles. Records of gifts given to Jessica compared to those given to me. What I'm seeing here, Officer Miller continued, is a pattern of behavior that your daughter felt necessary to document for her own protection. That's not criminal. That's smart. Richard stood up abruptly. This is absurd. We came here because she broke the law. Officer Miller met his eyes steadily. No, sir. You came here because your daughter refused to give you money and then embarrassed you by pointing out facts you wanted kept hidden. That's not a police matter. That's a family therapy matter. The room went silent. Eleanor stared at the table. Richard looked like he might explode. Officer Miller gathered the papers back into the folder and handed it to me. Miss Miller, you're free to go. I apologize for your time being wasted on this. Thank you, officer. As I stood to leave, Officer Miller turned back to my parents. His expression had shifted from professional courtesy to something harder. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I need to be very clear about something. Filing a false police report is a criminal offense. While I don't believe you acted with deliberately malicious intent, I do think you failed to consider the facts before making serious accusations against your daughter. If you attempt to file any additional reports regarding this matter, I will pursue charges for harassment and filing a false report. Do you understand? Richard opened his mouth, but no words came out. Do you understand? Officer Miller repeated. Yes, Richard finally managed. Good. I suggest you all consider seeking professional family counseling rather than involving law enforcement in what is clearly a personal dispute. He held the door open for me. I walked through it without looking back at my parents, their faces frozen in shock and humiliation. Outside, the afternoon sun felt impossibly bright. I sat in my car for several minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Dad called and told me what happened at the police station. I can't believe you humiliated them like that. I deleted the message without responding. Over the next few days, my phone continued to explode with messages from extended family. Aunt Brenda called to yell at me about disrespecting my parents. Cousins I barely knew sent essays about family values and forgiveness. Even my grandmother weighed in, leaving a voicemail about how disappointed she was in my behavior. I blocked most of them. The ones I didn't block, I sent a brief message: if you'd like to hear my side of the story, I'm happy to share it. Otherwise, please respect my boundaries. Only 2 people took me up on the offer. Aunt Brenda listened for about 3 minutes before interrupting to tell me I was making excuses. I hung up on her. My cousin Chloe, however, actually listened to the whole story. "Holy hell," she said when I finished. "I knew your parents treated you differently than Jessica, but I didn't realize it was this bad." "Most people didn't," I said. "They're very good at maintaining appearances." "What are you going to do now?" I looked around my quiet apartment. Move on with my life. Same as always. The following weeks were strange. I went to work, came home, spent time with friends who actually valued me. The absence of my family's drama created a space I hadn't realized I needed. No more guilt trips about missing events. No more comparisons to my sister. No more walking on eggshells trying not to offend people who were determined to be offended. Around mid-January, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized Eleanor's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single page covered in her tight cursive. The letter started with accusations. I was selfish, ungrateful, determined to destroy the family. It moved into self-pity. How could I treat them this way after everything they'd sacrificed? It ended with an ultimatum: apologize and make things right, or never contact any of them again. I read it twice, then filed it with the rest of my documentation. February brought unexpected news. Chloe called to tell me that Jessica and Mark were separating. Apparently, the revelations about his cryptocurrency losses and lying about the boat payments had broken something fundamental in their relationship. Mom and Dad were devastated, Chloe said, scrambling to provide support while dealing with their own financial crisis. They asked about you, Chloe added carefully. Whether you'd heard, and if you planned to reach out to Jessica, to any of them. I thought about it, thought about extending an olive branch, offering sympathy, trying to rebuild some kind of relationship. Then I remembered Christmas morning. Richard's face as he told me to get out. Eleanor's words about me being too pathetic to love. No, I said. I don't think I will. I don't blame you. Spring arrived with an unexpected development. Mark contacted me directly, asking to meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, I agreed. He looked terrible. Thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. We sat in a corner booth at a chain cafe, both nursing drinks neither of us really wanted. I need to apologize, he began, for everything. The boat, the lies, the way I stood by while your family treated you with such mistreatment. Okay. That's it. Just okay. I shrugged. What else do you want me to say? I accept your apology, but it doesn't change anything. Mark ran his hand through his hair. I've been thinking a lot about that Christmas, about what you said and how everyone reacted. You were right about all of it. I know. The thing is, it was easy to go along with how they treated you. It took pressure off Jessica and me. As long as you were the problem child, the difficult one, nobody looked too closely at our issues. That's probably the most honest thing anyone in my family has ever said to me. He laughed bitterly. Yeah, well, divorce has a way of forcing honesty. Your parents are furious with me, by the way. They blame me for everything falling apart. They would. They're also struggling hard financially. The boat got repossessed last month. They're looking at downsizing the house. I sipped my coffee and said nothing. Mark leaned forward. I know I have no right to ask this, but are you planning to help them? They're drowning, and I think they're too proud to ask you directly after everything. They didn't ask me directly before. They just expected me to offer. So that's a no. I met his eyes. Mark, they called the police on me. They tried to have me arrested for fraud because I wouldn't give them money. They've spent months telling everyone who will listen that I'm a terrible person who destroyed the family. Why would I help them? Because they're your parents. That's not actually a reason. Being related to someone doesn't obligate you to fund their mistakes or tolerate their unhealthy dynamics. He sat back, looking deflated. I guess I hoped you were a bigger person than me. Being a bigger person is overrated. It's just another way of saying let people walk all over you while you smile and pretend it doesn't hurt. We finished our coffee in silence. Before leaving, Mark handed me an envelope. This is the money your dad paid on the boat. All of it. Everything I owed him. It took me selling almost everything I owned, but it's all there. I looked at the envelope without taking it. That's between you and him. He won't accept it from me. But maybe if it came from you. No, please. I need to make this right. I stood up and grabbed my purse. Then make it right with him directly. I'm not your intermediary, and I'm not interested in being pulled back into their drama. I left him sitting there with his envelope full of guilt money. May brought warmer weather and an unexpected visitor. Jessica showed up at my apartment on a Saturday afternoon, looking tired but determined. We need to talk, she said when I opened the door. Do we? Please, 5 minutes. I let her in, mostly out of curiosity. She sat on my couch and looked around my apartment like she'd never seen it before. Maybe she hadn't. I couldn't remember the last time she visited. The divorce is final next week, she said abruptly. And I've been going to therapy. Good for you. My therapist thinks I need to apologize to you. She says I've been complicit in mom and dad's favoritism and that I've benefited from them treating you poorly. I sat in the chair across from her. Your therapist is right. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. I knew, okay? I always knew they treated you differently. I just didn't want to think about it too hard because it meant admitting I was part of the problem. You were more than part of it. You actively participated. Every snide comment, every comparison, every time you took their side against me. I know. The tears spilled over. I was jealous of you. That actually surprised me. Jealous of what? Your independence. Your career, the way you never needed their approval the way I did. I've spent my whole life trying to be the perfect daughter, and you just existed on your own terms. It made me crazy. I didn't know what to say to that. Jessica wiped her eyes. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to understand how messed up our family dynamics are. How messed up they are. Unless Eleanor and Richard have had some kind of revelation I'm not aware of. She shook her head. They're still convinced you're the villain in all this. Mom, especially. She's written this whole narrative where you deliberately destroyed the family out of jealousy and spite. Of course, she has. I tried talking to them about it, about how they've treated you over the years. Dad hung up on me. Mom cried and said I was being cruel. They don't want to acknowledge it. That would require admitting they were wrong, and people like them can't handle that. Jessica nodded slowly. My therapist says that, too. She says some people would rather maintain their delusions than face uncomfortable truths about themselves. We sat in silence for a moment. For what it's worth, Jessica said quietly. I'm sorry for all of it. For every cruel comment, every time I stood by while they hurt you, every moment I benefited from their favoritism and pretended not to notice. I'm genuinely, deeply sorry. The apology felt sincere. It also felt about 10 years too late. Thank you for saying that, I finally replied. It means something. Not enough to fix things, but something. I understand. She stood up to leave and hesitated. If you ever wanted to try having a relationship, just us, separate from mom and dad, I'd like that. Maybe someday, but not right now. That's fair. After she left, I sat in the quiet apartment, feeling oddly hollow. Part of me had wanted to slam the door in her face, to reject her apology the way they'd rejected me for years. But the larger part just felt tired. Tired of being angry, tired of carrying around the weight of their dysfunction. Summer arrived, and with it came more news through the family grapevine. Eleanor and Richard had sold their house and moved into a small condo. The boat was gone, the timeshare abandoned, and they declared bankruptcy to clear their credit card debt. Extended family had rallied to help them, donating furniture and money to ease the transition. Nobody asked me to contribute. Nobody even told me directly. I heard it all through Chloe, who kept me updated despite my insistence that I didn't care. You do care, she said during one of our phone calls. You're just too stubborn to admit it. Even if I do, caring doesn't mean I need to do anything about it. True enough. 1 year after that Christmas morning, I received another letter. This one was from Richard, handwritten on plain paper. It started differently than Eleanor's had. No accusations, no demands, just a simple statement. I've been thinking about what happened, and I realize I owe you an apology. The letter went on for 3 pages. He acknowledged the favoritism, the unreasonable expectations, the way they tried to manipulate me into funding their lifestyle. He admitted that calling the police had been vindictive and wrong. He even apologized for years of subtle and not-so-subtle emotional mistreatment. The letter ended with a request, not a demand or an ultimatum, but a simple question: would you be willing to meet for coffee and talk? I read it several times over the course of a week. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the boundaries I'd worked so hard to establish. Another part was curious whether this represented genuine change or just another manipulation. In the end, I sent a brief reply: I'll think about it. Whether I ever actually meet him for that coffee remains to be seen. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. But maybe they can be replaced with something new, something built on honesty instead of obligation. Or maybe not. Maybe some families are better loved from a distance, their dysfunction acknowledged but not engaged with. Either way, I'm finally free to make that choice on my own terms. And that, more than any apology or reconciliation, feels like the real victory. Have you ever had to choose between family and your own peace?